One.
Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Governor Moore's new budget proposes increases in education and transportation. What is the cause of the sudden fentanyl crisis in the DMV? And is there a solution to the lack of affordable housing in Montgomery County? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp, and Cheryl Riley, former County Council candidate for District 4. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. Throughout his administration, Republican Governor Larry Hogan emphasized fiscal responsibility in cutting taxes. Now there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, and it's no surprise that his successor, Democrat Wes Moore, has a different agenda. In his budget submission, Moore proposes a $63.1 billion spending plan that accelerates the minimum wage to $15 per hour, expands eligibility for child care tax credits, and makes permanent a tax credit to undocumented residents. But most importantly, the Moore budget seeks to boost investments in education and transportation. Mike, Governor Moore recommends an increase of $500 million for education, which was part of the legislation mandated by the General Assembly last year, and another $500 million for unspecified transportation projects. While it's early in the process, how would you rate the governor's first budget proposal?
I think he did a good job. I think it's, obviously his first priority, his first element was to go out and try to address the priorities that he identified in his campaign and be consistent with that and to be consistent with what the legislature had already mandated. I think he did that. I think one of the other things he did that was very smart, a couple of things he did that were smart were, one, he obviously stayed within the confines of the rainy day fund and the sunny day fund. So we've got all of the requirements that are met, whether it was Governor Moore or former Governor Hogan. There was a significant amount of additional dollars to spend. We're a $2+ billion surplus. And so there are resources there. So the question becomes, how do you do that judiciously? One of the things I think he did that was really smart was basically to put $150 million in for the legislature to be able to move around. So as opposed to kind of take up all of the spending capacity that was out there, he recognized that the legislature has that flexibility and the desire to fund their own activities and to make sure resources exist for that to occur, as opposed to moving stuff around that he'd already funded. So
well, you're jumping ahead on me, Mike.
I know, but I think that's a really smart move and a really smart thing to do, because it allows you to build a stronger relationship, I think, with the legislature in this process.
All right. Cheryl, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, one of the programs that the governor is going to impact is the Hogan plan to expand and widen the Capitol Beltway and I-270. Do you think it's going to be killed?
Probably at some point. I think to me, his budget is all over the map. I think unless you have hours and weeks and months to sort of read between the lines, it's still kind of vague. The more jobs that are created in the state of Maryland, those aspects probably wouldn't be as necessary to widen those roads. So to me, I kind of hope he does table it at least. We have many bigger fish to fry here in our state. So I think you hopefully will table it. It will be sort of not a top priority.
Interesting response there, Mike. Given the fact that this is a new budget and a new budget, I guess, regime in dealing with the General Assembly, the new rules allow the General Assembly, as you mentioned earlier, to move things around. How's this going to change the dynamic between the governor and the legislature? Because in the past, the governor recommended and the legislature could only reject.
Right. Now, I think it creates an interesting dynamic, because I think the expectation is that now you have a Democratic governor coming in with Democratic legislature. And so everyone's going to be on the same page. And, I think there's a sense that, of course, as Democrats, they'll spend a lot of money. I think that's a misnomer much of the time, but nevertheless, I think what it sets up is the governor's position, whether it's a Democratic or a Republican governor, is going to have to be much more of kind of the budget sheriff. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Governor Moore plays that role. How do you kind of work with the legislature? How do you lead them to certain points? But how do you pull them back? Because somebody's got to kind of be the traffic cop. And I think the governor has to play that role. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they balance that relationship between what he wants to get done and what the legislature thinks they want to get done. And I don't think they're going to be on the same team as much as people expect they will be.
So Cheryl, we're running out of time for in this segment, but let's talk about education real quickly. Governor's allocated 500 million more for education, and there's a blueprint for education. But at the same time, he's cutting the Boost program, which was a Hogan administration program that allowed scholarships program for low-income children. Given the crisis we're seeing in education, is that a wise move?
No. I think it gives choice, and it gives children an opportunity that aren't faring well in the public school system to have an option to go and thrive in another capacity. So I was actually kind of shocked that he took that off the table, frankly. I thought he would be completely behind that. So I think it's a very bad move. And I think it's a disadvantage to underprivileged children. Underprivileged children, many of them, thrive in situations where they have more one-on-one training or focus from the teacher, and you tend to get those in smaller private schools. So to me, honestly, I was shocked. Mr. Love, Peace, and Harmony took that off the table. So yeah, I think it's a bad move.
Well, as I said, we're still very early in the process. And of course, many other states are moving in the opposite direction with respect to school choice. So I intend to bring this up as a topic on future programs. But one major thing that the governor did this week was to remove some of the appointees from the Hogan administration and plan on replacing them with his own, particularly on the Public Service Commission. We'll talk about that next week. When we come back from this short break, what's causing the fentanyl crisis in Montgomery County? And is there any way to stop it? Stay tuned. And welcome back. Here's a chilling statistic. The Drug Enforcement Administration claims that in 2022, it seized more than 379 million doses of the synthetic drug fentanyl. That's enough to kill every American. Here in Montgomery County, the overdoses involving use were up 77%. And the problem is so pervasive that MCPS is hosting a Narcan training program. Narcan is the drug that revives people who once they've had an overdose. They're going to host a program on Saturday, the 28th, to teach people how to administer Narcan. Cheryl, you recently campaigned for a seat on the county council. Was the drug problem a major topic of concern during your campaign?
Absolutely. I lost my niece here in Montgomery County in 2021 to a fentanyl overdose. They found the person that sold it to her. He was from Baltimore City, came into our county, sold her pure fentanyl. The detectives wanted to charge him with murder because of the county council's policies. They couldn't even inform Baltimore City Police of his name. So there's that aspect. There are many regulations on the books via the council that helps, that doesn't thwart the distribution of selling fentanyl. So I'm one of, unfortunately, millions of people around the world, or hundreds of thousands of people, certainly in our state, that are dealing with this on many levels. I'm sorry, my first and top solution to that would be to, unfortunately, we have to end our sanctuary status, end the influx of illegal immigrants that are coming in unvetted. I'm not saying this is completely 100% their fault, but there is an uptick in the drug cartels entering our county and our state, and hence the availability for fentanyl in every aspect. In cannabis, it's showing up everywhere. it has risen and it will continue to do so. So while I applaud the school systems teaching, children about Narcan and, ways to deal with potential overdoses, we need to nip this in the bud. To me, this is a crisis. This is a crisis like the pandemic, if you ask me. So it needs to be dealt with very stern and strict enforcement. And that includes the state and county levels. And I think we can get a grip on this, but unfortunately, we need to close our borders here in Montgomery County. People think that we're not a border town, but we all are. Everyone in the nation is actually a border town as people are being bussed in.
Cheryl, thank you. And again, I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm sure this hits you in a very personal way, but it also impacts all the Montgomery County families in a personal way. There were 3 overdoses of teenagers just this past 2 weeks in Montgomery County from fentanyl. So it is a rising and pervasive problem. And Mike, as a former council member, you've got a unique perspective on this.
Well, and it's it's a frightening issue, because if you look at the statistics, drug use is especially among teens, is not increased. And so what's happening is you're seeing the drugs that are being sold are being laced with fentanyl. And so, or they're being made more attractive. You've got the different rainbow drugs that are out there. And so they're being made attractive, and kids just don't understand what's happening, and that fentanyl is making its way into so many different products. And so you have so many different issues to address that I think we've got to focus on. So one, we know coming out of pandemic that mental health in students is an issue that needs to be front and center. And so we've got to make sure that we're getting them the support that they need to make sure that they are working through the various issues in all aspects of their life, and so that we're not seeing their turn to drug use. Obviously, opioids continues to be a challenge, and so we see that, and we've got to be able to make sure we're continuing to be vigilant on that. And then we've got to do an educational piece to make sure that students understand that the deadly nature of fentanyl, and that fentanyl is in everything. And the fentanyl is being laced into everything, and so little fentanyl can kill you. And so you think you're taking this, and you think you're taking a drug for ADHD, and that's what somebody has told you that you're taking, and that, from a drug use perspective, and that's laced with fentanyl. And so now all of a sudden you're in a position you never even anticipated being. And so we've got so many different pieces that have to dovetail with each other for us to move forward. And we have a school system with 160,000+ students. And so we've got to be on this yesterday.
Well, but here's the shocking thing for families. I mean, as you mentioned, the drug is being introduced into all various forms of pills, and whether it's Adderall, whether it's Ritalin, people are taking things and not knowing about it. What is the best thing that parents can do to address this? Because it can't just be the school system. So Cheryl, how can parents and others address this with their youth? And frankly, it's not just a youth problem. The District of Columbia has seen an increasing uptick in fentanyl deaths among adults. So it's not just a youth problem, but let's focus on that. Cheryl.
Well, you're right. It's not just a youth problem. My niece was about to turn 30. She died 2 days before her 30th birthday. So it's not just a youth problem, but I think I say this across the board with anything. Parents need to do research. They need to understand the different language that children use with one another. Get involved, get on their phone, see what TikToks they're reading. You can buy drugs off of Craigslist. There's a certain way to do that. There's verbiage. Parents need to really I learned it all through my niece. She had this addiction for years. So I learned, the different verbiage, and trust me, it's still pretty much the same. And also, we've got to lift children up to realize they need to respect themselves. And again, this has been the age-old problem. Oh, well, they're doing it, so it's cool. Or I'm invincible. Children feel invincible. I look to parents and anybody that has an influence over children to, be aware of what they may not be the adults in the room may not be aware of certain topics. So if your kid's on TikTok and you think they're looking at a cartoon, no, they could be learning about where to buy fentanyl or where to find it, literally.
Thank you. And again, your personal experience is very tragic, and appreciate your sharing that with us. I also want to applaud the county government for making this a point of concern, as well as the media for talking about this. It's not just a far off problem. It's really in our back door. Now we're going to turn to a different, more intractable problem, which is affordable housing. And with great fanfare this week, the county government lauded the announcement of the largest ever affordable housing project development in the county for a total of 190 residents. Mike, that's the pimple on the elephant's ass. I hate saying it that way. A study was done in 2015 that said there were 380,000 dwelling units in Montgomery County, but only 2% of it were built since 2010. We need 3,000 units a year, and they're building 1,500. So, we're 30,000 units behind in the decade. So how are we going to accomplish this?
Well, I appreciate you picking some really easy issues for us to address today. So
yeah, well,
but no, the housing issue has been an issue since I was elected to office. So we've needed 380,000 units for the last 20 years, and the reality is we haven't come close. And there is no magic bullet. There's no single solution that we're going to do. And the reality is that we've got to, again, kind of what we're talking about with the fentanyl issue, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. And you've got to be able to, one, recognize that there are changes taking place. Interest rates are making it difficult for projects to get financed. And so how do we as a county help facilitate that and provide some stability for potential developers? We've got to increase the ability for a developer to get a project through. We've got to have a real conversation. We have real conversations in the county about what it means. What is density? We went through the Thrive 2050 discussion. I just spent Tuesday and Wednesday this week at a series of seminars in the development space, and the challenge is, and we're not the only people seeing this, is what does development begin to look like? We were trying to do dense development in have people live near where they work. Well, so if you have downtown development and people aren't going into businesses anymore because I can work from home 3 or 4 days a week, what's that do to the development cycle? And where are people? What are the pathways? What are the transit pathways and the commuter pathways? What's that beginning to look like? So what's that mean for where we need to put density? We've got to have real candid conversations, and we've got to be able to talk about it in a real way. And it's not just affordable and just low income. It's got to be workforce housing as well. We've got to allow people to be able to live here, work here, and our kids to be able to come back and live here. And there's so many different pieces, but we've got to recognize it, and we've got to put it on the table and have honest dialogue with ourselves and with our communities, because we have a whole lot of NIMBYism in Montgomery County too, and we don't want to see it in my backyard. We want to put it someplace else.
Mike, in preparation for this topic, I reached out to a national developer who works in workforce housing. Mm-hmm. And he does public-private partnerships in Vail and in Aspen and Truckee and areas where seasonal employment, is necessary. But it costs, even if you have no ground costs, mm-hmm. It's $400,000 per unit of a townhouse. I mean, $400,000 per unit. Now, Cheryl, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, looking at the Montgomery County development cycle, says there are 7 different county and state entities that are involved in nonprofit housing. That there are seven. Isn't just red tape strangling the development process?
1,000%. First of all, I'm just going to say it flat out. The planning board, anything they proposed should be off the table. So the fact that the Silver Spring development is actually going through with Natalie at the helm is crazy to me. Anything that they've done, scrap it. We need to start from scratch. Nothing should take 20 years to get affordable housing. What happened to NPDU? Affordable housing for first responders, for police officers, for nurses. Where's their affordable housing? That just kind of went by the wayside. What they're trying to do is make affordable housing for undocumented people coming into our county. Sorry, but that's pretty much the crux of it. Where's the affordable housing for people that have lived here for decades that are terrified of losing their homes they've owned for 35 plus years because of higher tax rates? My entire family grew up here. I'm the only person left in Montgomery County, and I have a big family, aunts and uncles. My father grew up here, grandparents. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did. I only know that I see a lot of fluff, a lot of talk. And let me tell you, look at the verbiage now. Now it's not only affordable housing, it's deeply affordable housing.
Well,
what does that even mean?
I want to pivot from one of the points that you just made to Mike. Mike, Cheryl was talking about what's called the missing middle now. And, this is workforce housing, essentially. Arlington County is struggling with this because any attempt to add additional density meets resistance from the public. So how do we address this missing middle into our development process?
We have to have candid conversations. I mean, we have to have leaders who are willing to deal with the fact that there are going to be folks who are unhappy with this as a potential outcome. And we have to be able to go back to our master plans, and we've got to be able to make sure that we've got the capacity there within those master plans. But then we have to put real programs on the table that, to your point, can augment what a developer can do. And we've got to be able to streamline the regulatory process to allow them to get those projects moving forward. I mean, one of the challenges with MPDUs always was that it's a part of a larger development. So it was always 12.5% of some number of other units being built. We haven't been building a whole lot of other units either. So if you're you're dependent upon a big development taking place to get 12.5% for a moderately priced dwelling unit. We've actually got to just start focusing on workforce housing as a stock. So that's what we're building, not trying to do another larger development and trying to hope we get 12.5% of something on the side. We've got to have a concerted effort on workforce.
Well, thank you. Cheryl, we got about 30 seconds left. I'll let you wrap it up for us before we go to break.
Okay, first and foremost, I think that we need to address the crime issue in Montgomery County and actually the state of Maryland. First and foremost, enough. What is happening is unfathomable. So before we
How
even
does
get
that impact housing?
Who's going to want to live here? I mean, it's affecting every aspect of our lives, quality of lives, businesses moving in, among other issues, obviously. But I think as far as the affordable housing, Mike, you made a good point. They need to listen. They're not listening. Listen, I've been to the Thrive 2050 meetings. They don't care. They're not listening to a word. So
Cheryl, we got to go to break. So
okay,
we're going to have to end it there. When we come back from this short break, parting shots. Welcome back. Now with parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Thanks, Casey. You identified a couple really tough issues that are addressing the community right now, which is fentanyl and housing. And we have a number of folks who just got elected to office who talked about grand and glorious things that they want to be doing. And they all come in with the best of intentions and the things that they want to do. And the reality is now it's time for everybody to look around and it's time to govern. And I want to wish all of those new folks, whether at the county council level, the Board of Education level, the state legislature, best of luck over the course of the next month and a half when this realization starts to hit and they really start to figure out what it is that they have to do as opposed to kind of the lofty things that they said they wanted to do, and that they do the homework and they really buckle down and start to delve into those issues because they're very important.
Thanks, Mike. Cheryl Riley, your first opportunity to give a parting shot.
Well, I actually concur with Mike very much. Although I don't think they have the best intentions, that's just me. I do wish and hope that certainly the county council starts to listen to residents, like actually hear their concerns, see what they're going through via the drug crisis and especially crime, and not ignore the issues. Be out there, be engaging with us on social media, wherever they can. And I do hope that they take an opportunity to make some definite changes.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. Thank you for both you and Mike for appearing on Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. But before we break, I just want to mention that today is International Holocaust Day. It represents the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And as we've had a number of anti-Semitic violence and activities here in Montgomery County, we should always remember that that type of activity and that mindset is not welcome here anymore. For
No.
21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.